All right, here we are. Okay, so here we are for FY22 projected preliminary revenues, total income, all sources. Did you want to go to the, oh, you know what, never mind, stay on this page for now. Total income, the total net income, 14,366,536. As the expense budget stands right now, the total is 14,366,536. So zero variance. So there it's a balanced budget. Revenues and expenses are balanced right now.
All right. Meeting adjourned.
No.
What?
Oh, it was worth a shot, Stan.
It really was, wasn't it?
Nice try.
A boy can dream.
Who said meeting adjourned? Who said
Margaret
that?
did when she said zero
You
variance.
said that. Oh my God, you're too funny.
Yeah, looks aren't everything. All right.
All right, so down in the maximum budget calculations, this isn't what we're using to calculate the budget, but this would be the maximum, the levy limit, our actual levy limit, which is about, let me take a peek here, what we're using for taxes and what the maximum levy limit is. 12 local property taxes used, 12,683,776. And down here, it would be roughly $13 million. So we're well under the levy limit. New growth is estimated at 200,000. You know, there could be concerns about new growth, but there is absolutely no sign currently that growth is slowing on the residential side. The residential tax base is growing. So, and as are the values, by the way. So we are estimating that $200,000, and I just carried that down here to the maximum budget calculations. The debt exclusion amount has decreased from last year, partly because of the school's debt refinancing and you know, the slight reductions that we're seeing in the highway barn excluded debt service. So you see the subtotal, and then the state aid, all down to other revenue sources. I've just carried from the FY22 income ladder sheet for a subtotal maximum allowable budget minus obligations of $15,500,914. So we are, you know, we're about $1.1 million under this amount, and that shows right here. It's 1.134,378. And then the amount of our excess levy over the debt exclusion amount is $305,126. You know, I should add, this is, you know, there's breathing room here. But if, for example, a couple of large commercial establishments folded and there was no replacing them, you know, with anything else, like an Amazon distribution facility, for example. The Sears store generated $110,000 in tax revenue each year. So there would be a significant hit. And right now, during a time like this, where we have unprecedented potential economic challenges, now's the time to have breathing room in that maximum levy section with the excess levy capacity. It's levy that's not being used. It's taxes that are not being assessed. So it's money being left alone, and that's that. So anybody have any questions on this sheet? Okay. I don't know if we need to go through the income ladder, but there's just one item, I think. Well, no, there's two items. So the select board, and I'm going to ask the finance committee, you know, for your insight and recommendations on the contingency line item, versus adding funds to the reserve fund, because the select board isn't unanimously in favor of doing the contingency line item again this year. I think there is a, the members don't share um, support for doing the contingency line item. There was input at Monday night's meeting that we should just increase the reserve fund line item, fund that, have the select board and finance committee co-sign approval on that, and eliminate the contingency line item. So that's why I've highlighted this section, because it's the $118,000 here that is the amount that we're looking at using, 50,000 of which would be for the contingency line item.
What was the argument for doing that, Margaret?
I think.
And how is that more
Well, I know
palatable?
all right, so the contingency line item formalized the requirement that the select board and finance committee both approve, right? The reserve fund statutorily requires only the finance committee to sign off on reserve fund transfers. But there was a sense that in prior years, the finance committee, or not the finance committee, the select board has been given the courtesy of signing off on the reserve fund transfers along with the finance committee. But it really truly, with a reserve fund, the finance committee truly is the entity that formalizes the reserve fund transfers. That's it. However, I think there was also a concern that, it's creating additional accounts that we don't need to carry on the books. And but then other members, another select board member would say, well, I like the fact that the contingency line item policy and procedure formalizes the requirement for the board and finance committee to both sign off. So it's a mixed bag. I decided that this is not a battle I'm going to fight, because either way, there is a mechanism in the budget to approve the transfer of funds for certain things. So June, I don't know if you have anything else to add to that, but
No, I think that kind of sums it all up.
I do like the fact that I do like formal procedures that require certain sign-offs and things. But
My only reasoning too would be behind having the contingency is because technically speaking, the reserve fund should be for unforeseen type items,
oh, that's true too.
unplanned for items. So there's a few things that are in the contingency line item that we are putting in there if for the contract, union contracts, for regular contracts, and other items like that. And they're foreseen, we know it's going to happen, we just don't know exactly how much. And it's kind of nice to have it all lumped in one. I know I've seen other towns do it that way with the union contracts. It's just kind of nice to have it lumped in so that way there we don't necessarily show our hand as to what we have available for the unions to negotiate that part of it. But and where it's foreseen, that's my big thing, is that it's not really an unforeseen thing. But that's my thought.
So you're saying you would like to keep the contingency, or you'd like to leave it in the reserve fund?
I'd like to see it separated, just more so just because it's a foreseen, all of those things are foreseen. We know them, we know they exist, we know they're going to happen. It's just we don't know exactly how much. And it's also nice just so that way there everybody's on the same page to spend it.
I think we put it there last year in case we needed to do that in leaving the reserve fund for potential issues, because we really don't know where we're going to go. And like I said last year, I was more concerned about this year than I was last year. And I still am even more concerned about next year than I am this year after I'm looking at this.
Yep.
Am I the only one thinking this way, or is anybody
Well,
else?
no,
agreeing with me?
but they're not saying to not fund it in order to reduce the funding. This is merely just a mechanism for how to do it.
Right, right, I
So
understand,
it's
but
either,
Where do we articulate
either
on
having
the,
Go
no,
ahead,
on the
Joe.
contingency fund, where do we articulate what the things we were laying these things out for? I mean, I
Yeah.
know it's police contract, fire contract, the fire chief contract, and then the evaluation still going on for
Yeah.
adjustment and wages. Those are 4 items. Is it just those 4, or is it other additional?
There really are only 2, Scott. The first is COVID-related expenses that are either reimbursable, that's the key word, through the Federal CARES Act coronavirus relief funds, or determined by FEMA or the Mass Executive Office of Administration and Finance to not be fully reimbursable. And that would be where the $50,000 in free cash comes in. The other category is any required recurring costs related to any employment contract adjustments or expense line adjustments due to recurring contract adjustments. And at your last meeting, or one of your last meetings, you took out the whole market rate adjustments. Those are gone. And that would be the other 39,000 plus.
Margaret, I'm sorry, Janet.
No, that's okay. I was just going to say, and the reason for the first one is we may get money back, so it would go back into the contingency rather than having to utilize our reserve fund to pay that.
It would go back into the general fund. Yeah.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, it would go back. Yeah, it'd go back into the general fund.
But so does leftover contingency. So does leftover reserve fund money.
Right.
Correct.
Well,
But that's a rationale for using the free cash, because it would come back and it would flow back
exactly.
into the free cash.
Exactly.
But they're both funded for, well,
No,
The-
only,
Contracts would have to be done through raise and appropriate because those are going to be an ongoing expense.
That's the other 30, that's the 39K or so.
that's right, exactly.
well, I mean, either raise and appropriate, or can't they come and ask for a reserve fund transfer or not?
Yes, so that's one of the arguments by one of the members of the board in putting all the money into the reserve fund. Except that to June's point, it is an anticipated expense. It's an anticipated expense. The only question is how much. So.
But that's up to you
The only
guys.
difference I
It's-
see is that it gives the select board authority over the rest of the reserve fund.
The reserve fund is yours. I mean, ultimately, the
Well,
reserve
you
fund.
said we've done, the history has said that the courtesy of having them
Courtesy.
approve.
Yeah.
Well, okay, but so if we're going to lump it all together, I don't see the distinction between keeping them separate other than having 2 separate accounts. Like, I don't understand what's the downside to having them separate? Is there any downside besides having 2 separate accounts? I mean, if we're agreeing on a dollar amount, it's coming out of 2 pots or 1 pot?
My only thing
Administrative-
would be the difference of that one is foreseen and one isn't.
Right.
And
So I mean,
I
that's an argument for why the purpose behind each fund, and so even more of a reason to keep them separate. I'm of a mind to keep them separate, but that's me.
I'm in
One
the
vote.
keeping them separate as well.
I would agree for another point of view too. It's actually makes, I think, being new to this, it makes it easier to talk about
Yes,
these
and I
expenses.
wholeheartedly
it-
agree with that.
Clearer that what we're talking about is the unknown amount for this year, and then next year it may not be there at all, or it's
That's
going to be for
right.
something different.
The idea of the contingency line was never to have it a permanent line. It happened because of COVID, and here we are still
Yeah.
exactly 1 year from the declared emergency.
Oh,
we can-
okay, but half of this, Margaret, is for this ongoing things that we're going to keep having. I mean, I'll go back to why do we need a contingency fund to cover things that if we're negotiating union contracts all the time,
Mhm.
it sounds more like a timing issue with the budget. And why do we need to have, rephrasing that, why all of a sudden do we need a contingency line item to realize that expense that's always happened over the past however many years we've had unions? Why is it different now?
The only thing that's different is that this is a negotiations year, Stan. That's the only thing that's
We've
different.
never had a negotiations year in a budget cycle?
I don't know
I
how
mean-
the town has dealt with, I don't know how the town has dealt with prior negotiations, where the money was kept, whether you went back to a town meeting after the fact to appropriate funds.
Oh, June?
It's, well, I know in sometimes in the past, the negotiations are not short-term things. I mean, as much as it's a negotiation year, they may not have resolved
Right.
negotiations a year from now.
Yeah.
And that
That
has
is
been in the
correct.
past.
Yes, they've actually gone 2 full years before they actually had come up to an agreement. In the past, I know that a couple of times the chief has actually put the increases in his budget. This year where it's level funded,
Yeah.
it,
That's the
you
other thing.
know, yeah.
We're level funding those budget lines. We are not going to put anticipated contract adjustments in the budget lines. It's probably, I don't think it's advisable for the town to do that.
Okay, so that would be different than prior years where we're saying that we're formalizing a level funded budget at the same time that there, I mean, and just that alone is enough to say that if you're going to have if you're having negotiations, then that's different. I guess I see that, but why don't the negotiations just make the pay effective when it can be budgeted for?
There's,
When it-
well, we're
That's
not
too
saying
much
that it
logic
can't.
to be involved right there.
That's
not
all
gonna happen.
subject to negotiations, Dan.
Well, and it just, I guess I'll go back to, and Scott, it sounded like maybe did you have some thoughts on how it's happened in the past?
Like I said, I just remember, like when I first joined the committee, I think that was probably the 2-year thing. This was probably back in 2006 that they were still, or maybe it was 2007 or 2008, that they were still in the process of negotiating. They were working off the previous contract. And I'd have to go back to the exact details of how we handled the funding, but I knew there was a big jump of what there was going to be the actuals when they finally, because then they got back pay on their negotiations too. So
I'd almost rather
it gets
have that go to a
complicated.
special and have it be voted on by the town at the time, so it's very obvious what it is.
I have a hard time when we're level funding our town employees with giving them whatever you're gonna give them this year. Is it, I never get this right, COLA
All
versus
right.
step.
2%.
And then they get to negotiate. I'm sorry, I don't mean they, but then unions, and I'm not saying police or fire, because I know it happens everywhere.
Well, in the
everywhere.
schools and.
The schools, the teachers, that they get the COLA plus a step. I mean,
Mhm.
I'm having a hard time swallowing that, because our poor employees last year only got COLA.
Zero.
And now
No, they didn't
No,
get COLA.
zero.
No,
They
Didn't
took
they
even
got
get
zero.
COLA.
nothing. Okay, they got nothing. Okay, so now this year we're gonna let them have it.
well, but it's
but
up to the negotiators to
That
decide that.
certain
It's not
group are still gonna
guaranteed.
get that plus, and I'm really having a hard time with that. And I'm not saying that people aren't deserving, but it just doesn't seem fair. I don't know. I'll be quiet.
Well, and that would, and then I would go back to Janet to saying that's why it's something like that should have, maybe even has to come to a special to be approved so that the voters can actually understand it, as opposed to buried in the reserve fund. That I'm actually getting more staunchly opposed to that this should not just be buried in the reserve fund. So this either needs to be a line item as the contingency or not even in there. And if and when those raises come through, in order to pay for them, we either have to go to a special or they then have to come and ask for a reserve fund. And even then, I'm not excited about it, because then that doesn't really go before the town. I just don't want it buried. I don't, to me, this feels like a way to bury it. And I don't want to bury it. And I know we go through these negotiations all the time, and I'm sure that this is, well, I'm not sure. We've had ongoing pay increases and whatever for years and years and years, but I don't think it should be buried in some large dollar amount fund that can just be swept under the rug like the reserve fund. But that's not really seen by
So,
you know,
so how would you put that? Would you put in it, I mean, union, union step, union, salary or percentage increase and then plug it in that way? If you didn't want to bury it?
I'm
I
starting
mean-
to think that we just do the COVID money and not put this in either.
So I'm just trying to think this through. Right now, the budget lines for all the collective bargaining units are level funded, whereas non-union employees have 2%. So it doesn't,
They do have 2%?
the non-union employees show a 2% recommendation in the budget and over here.
They do.
Yeah, non-union.
Okay.
But the collective bargaining unit employees, and actually the fire chief too, because he still has a contract to negotiate, they show zero. They show level funding in their budget lines. And so this was the area that we were going to try to allow for some adjustment without showing, without showing our hand for any potential
So
contract.
they're only showing level funded because they haven't been negotiated
That's
yet.
correct. That's
So
correct.
what if you left it level funded and then put in another one underneath it, 2%, because they're going to, I mean, I know it's a little
But-
more work, but and then say,
Well,
we don't
if-
know what this is going to be, but at least it would give people,
Well-
you can't, or you can. I'm just asking for my
Well,
own
that's because of what
education.
Margaret just said. She doesn't want to show her hand.
I think that's probably, I don't think it's well.
Well, you
I
wouldn't
mean,
be showing
You could do that.
You
you
wouldn't
could
Sure
be
we would.
that,
We'd
but
be
it would
showing
be
them
a
we could afford a
giveaway.
2% raise.
It would be
No.
a giveaway.
No, I don't mean it that way. I'm not explaining myself. I agree with what you're saying, but I think that the townspeople should be able to see. I like what Stan is trying to say. It shouldn't just be like not noted.
So you could build in 2% increases in those budget lines. You could do that. Take out the 39,243 here and put into, Chief Galvin, for example, said a 2% increase for the patrolmen's union or the police union would be about $18,000 something. And you'd have to expect the same or a little less for fire and EMS. You could build that in, but we don't know what other contract adjustments there are going to be. But I mean, you could do that. It would keep all employees on an equal playing field, but it also gives away the fact that, oh, look, the town's at least willing to go at 2%.
Right.
But aren't they
So
going
this-
to? I mean, what is the chances of them not negotiating for 2% in a step?
In a COVID year, I hope good. I hope
Well,
a
yeah.
strong possibility.
Depends on what else they're looking for.
That's exactly right. There are a lot of different sections of the contract that are to be
I
negotiated.
do have to say that there's been a few towns lately that I've been on the Neshoba Regional Dispatch Center's Finance Committee over there, and I noticed that the other towns that we're in with, that's what they actually use, is they have actually a contingency line item
Yeah,
for contract negotiations
yeah.
on
Okay,
most
and then
of
how
their,
does
as a
how does that
normal
not-
type thing.
how does that not tip a hand then? Because that's showing a dollar amount, isn't it?
Well, most of them have more than one union.
So they just say it's a lump sum and this is.
It's pretty much, I don't want to say a slush fund, but it's money set aside for union contracts. And I mean, it can be used for other things at the end
Payroll
of the year.
It's a payroll
Yeah.
contingency.
Unfortunately, our hand is tipped a lot because all of our revenues are transparent.
Pretty much.
So
Well, right. I mean,
anybody,
because
I'm
if we
sure
list
that
it-
they have somebody on next from their union next tracking this stuff to know where how flush or not flush a town
Mhm.
is.
Mhm.
So we really aren't going to be able to
Yeah.
hide that. Other than, I think the biggest thing people's biggest concerns is the fairness amongst other employees. That theirs is not doing anything that's getting them fatter than what the increases are for others.
Mhm.
And where Margaret, do you know where they stand in right now I know their contracts expired, but it's step increases. I know before, going back many years ago, most of them were senior people that had already exceeded the maximum step. On today's contract, at least looking back at the previous one, are there other patrol officers still at the point that they would get steps?
Yes.
Or
Yes,
Yeah, we
there
have
are.
a number of police officers that have just come on.
Yes.
okay,
Yeah.
is it
And
like
fire and EMS, we really have nothing to gauge. I mean, this is a
Right.
brand new contract.
I mean, you could just put the 2% in the line items, and anything above
could.
that, they would have to
There you go.
negotiate some other way too. I mean, you could do that too if you wanted to just do that and do away with the contingency.
what has been their percentages on their steps? Has that been kind of a consistent, or is it all over the place? I know these teachers' steps, the ones used to be the most confusing. I mean,
I hesitate to, I don't have the contract in front of me. I hesitate to guess. For some reason, I want to say 4.5, but that could be wrong. So
See, I was
can,
thinking 2 to 3. I want to say there was maybe a 3.5 at one point, but I could be totally wrong too. It's been a while.
yeah,
since I was
we'll
there.
have to get that right from the,
Is it done the same way as a teacher contract? Because that's the one I'm most familiar with, like your bachelor's degree plus this, your master's degree plus that, your CAGs plus that.
no, the teacher's contract is structured a little differently, but the police contract does have the educational incentives and all kinds of, there's stipends for
Certifications and
certifications and things like that. So
But I think the fire will probably, I know we have never had one, but I'm imagining that, all those different levels, if you go back and you get this and that. I remember.
well, yeah, it's an interesting one because yeah, it's possible. It's possible. Yet to be negotiated, but
Yeah, I don't understand them enough. I'm either way, whatever you guys want to do is,
I said
they're
separate.
going to be able to see what we have, right?
Since you had
Is
mentioned
Mary
the,
on yet?
Is she out in the audience? Oh, Chief Clark's here. Oh, and Mary's here.
Wasn't here just a second ago.
I think Mary
Just
Mary just got here actually. Good timing.
since you had mentioned the police
Mary.
incentive, are we still paying the state's share from the Quinn bill days, or was that negotiating the contract, or what's this? I was just curious.
There
what
are a
happened
few
over the years.
officers that are still eligible for Quinn bill, so they're still Quinn eligible. It's
Right,
whittled
but
rest of them
down.
are
are
we just
just-
paying our share, or we are also sucking
Just
up
our-
the states?
I believe it's just our 50%.
Okay, just our
believe that-
50%.
I believe it's just our 50%. I have to look at the contract and make sure that that's stipulated in there. I think it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Mary, we're bogged down on the first item that we're trying to decide for tonight, and that's the on the revenue side, and listing the contingency money. Either having it listed as contingency or having it or lumping it into reserve fund, or not having it in adding 2% to police and fire as a potential for pay increases. The thought is that, may or may not want to give away before negotiating what we're willing to have for pay increases. Therefore, we don't necessarily want to just highlight it in the budget as here's a lump sum that we're okay with, and, don't want to take away negotiating power. But on the other hand, select board was split on how they wanted to handle it. Part one faction wanted to just lump it in with the reserve fund in order to have, and then have both of us have signing authority or approval authority on that. I don't know how that delineates down to when something that's not those expenses come through, but that's a separate issue, or maybe it's not a separate issue. That's one of my issues. Or keeping them separate, highlighting what it is like we did last year. It's X amount for this, X amount for this, X amount for that. or doing an increase in budgets to reflect it. Thoughts?
Well, I think the situation where you got ongoing negotiations and you don't want to tip your hand, I think you need to have a contingency fund that we think is large enough to handle whatever might come up, but not, it's indeterminate about where it goes in the sense of the negotiations, you know, how much cash might be on the table.
Well, I mean, we wouldn't be negotiating in good faith if we didn't have any money set aside for. Right? I mean,
Precisely.
if we,
Yeah, precisely. Yeah. So clearly you need to have it in some kind. And then I've followed the email traffic, and I think, and the question that came up, do we need some special contingency? And part of it, I think, is COVID, and part of it are these negotiations, right?
right.
That's
Yeah.
correct.
So the only reason to pick one over the other is what happens to the funds if they're not used. And I don't recall if they go in a different direction.
If the funds aren't used, they're going to go right back to the general fund at the close of the year.
Both of them would.
Yes, they would. Yep.
And so the split on the select board on the objection is just proliferation of fund
Accounts.
accounts saying
That's one of the, yeah, that was one of the concerns. And I think there was the thought that, hey, you know, the finance committee has given courtesy to the board in the past to sign off on reserve fund transfers. And so that practice could continue. Whereas the contingency fund, as you know, the contingency
It's
policy
stated.
and procedure requires the
Yeah.
sign-offs of both.
Yeah. Yeah.
See, if I find that logic interesting, it seems, I don't know. I guess I'm of a mind, maybe we just keep like we did last year, so we keep it as a separate line and we itemize it. And if it's wording to say up to 2% for negotiations or something, so that we're not saying that it's like an automatic. I don't know if that's any less giveaway or
It's
know if it
really
really
hard
matters.
to know what contract provisions we're going to be negotiating and how that's going to pan out. You know, whether it's going to be a compensation percent increase, or it's going to be some other benefit, or, you know, there's just so many contract areas that will be open for negotiation.
Well, how did we word it last year? It was 4 things, right?
Last year it
but
was.
But it wasn't contract negotiation, because you're saying.
No, last year it was market wage increases for certain non-union positions to within the median and mean range for comparable positions in area towns.
Okay.
Also keep in mind that some of the contract negotiation part of the expense could be in expenses, not necessarily all payroll either, depending on what they negotiate.
Right.
That's true too. Mhm.
Mary, I don't know how long you were sitting in the audience, but my concern, or not my concern, is trying to be equitable amongst our town employees as well as our bargaining unit employees, knowing that last year, you know, town employees were, correct me, Margaret, if I'm going to say this right, were flat funded and nothing. And
Mhm.
the bargaining units all got what they were, you know,
What they had
even
negotiated.
COVID, whatever was negotiated. So I don't know, I'm having a hard time with, you know, our town employees, again, not getting, you know, equity amongst the bargaining, you know what I'm saying?
Oh, but they're in this year. They
There
have
is this year. Yeah, that's
Mhm.
what I was just trying to say. I didn't know
Right,
if you
so
heard that
it's-
conversation.
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, the other alternative is, I mean, we kind of right now, obviously, we kind of have some neighborhood of money that's for anticipation. Like, you know, we indicated the 2%, that would be like 18,000 on the police. Then with the fire and that, I mean, the other piece comes down to is if there's anything additional, I mean, you do have the reserve funds, but you also have it where you could just tell them they got to live within their total allocated money. I mean, even if the police officer gets the raise, they don't get the overtime or whatever, that the police chief will have to earn his money there by making sure that, yes, we may have those increased expenses, but he's got to find ways to cut the expenses or cut time to come within budget. So there isn't a case that we have to, automatically take what they give us. We won't have the individual control about what the individuals get, but we do have the control over what their total sum that they get. So I would just look at it that way, because like I said, we'll never control
Yeah, that's a good way.
what
of looking
what
at
the
it.
individual officers get.
Mhm.
I mean, if they want to, go extra or whatever over the other individuals out there, the police chief
Yeah.
will have the flexibility to,
There you go.
cut overtime or whatever that he can do to ensure he stays within that maximum amount.
True.
So, and going back to the contingency, I definitely like the separate contingency line item for the COVID stuff, just because, especially with the explanation of it's the stuff that we're going to fund by free cash and that we expect to get reimbursed for.
Mhm.
I definitely, if it was a standalone item like that, I definitely would. My thing would have been I would definitely stand for having the contingency line item there. The salary one, I'm either way. I'm not standing on one side or the other really strongly. I mean, it could either be reserves or in the contingency line.
Well, sounds like maybe we need a motion to haggle.
Don't
it out.
everyone speak at once?
I know, right?
No, let's see where we stand. Just have a motion to keep the contingency line funding at what's the dollar amount of whatever it is in the budget, 89,000
Oh, I'm sorry, that is
something.
under, I have to go up.
Funded by 50,000 free cash and the rest being raised and appropriate. That'll be my motion.
Well, is it the 118? Is that what we're talking about?
No, it's
no,
not
it's
the
89 something, right?
It's actually, yeah, it's 89,243 total.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was
Expense
looking at
line,
sources of
Margaret.
funds. Yeah.
Where is it, June?
On the expense line.
It's
Well,
line 132 or on the overall budget.
On the
Yeah,
expense line.
that's,
Yeah, there you go.
here it is, 89,243.
Gar, can you repeat that motion, please? I'm sorry.
But my motion is keeping it as it is. I mean, if you have to agree with me, I mean, it's like, let's just see where everybody stands on it and we'll move forward from there. This isn't a case that you have to approve or disapprove here, but keep the motion of keeping the contingency line item funded at the 89,243, where 50,000 is from free cash and the remaining 39,243 is from raise appropriate. That is the motion, which would be keeping exactly how you see it in the budget presented. Let's find out
Very
where
clear.
people stand. So
do we have a second?
Second.
all right, who's the most senior? We go with that process for voting.
Well,
I get to go last.
We have to discuss, don't we?
Oh yeah, I
I was
have
gonna say,
discussed
well, we
too.
could have any discussion on this at this point.
So Scott, your motion doesn't actually follow what you said, which you supported for COVID, but not for the other.
I
Or-
said what I do definitely support the COVID. I could go either way on
go
the
either way,
on the
sorry,
salary,
sorry.
right? So I mean, if there's 3 or 4 of you that say no to this, I mean, obviously then we can go for a motion of a different breakdown of what people, somebody's more favorable to. I don't know if there's more to discuss on it. We've definitely discussed a lot, at least for this particular piece.
Yeah, I agree. I think we should just take a vote. But
Don't feel
fine. We
pressured.
shouldn't squash discussion. Does anyone want to discuss this further? So hearing none, I would do a roll call vote. And how do we decide we're doing it? By alphabet or by seniority? Am I the most senior?
Yes.
I guess I am, right?
Not by age, just by,
Longevity.
I'm not going there,
Yeah.
that part of it.
Not long in the tooth, but yeah. All right, Stan, aye. Next would
Does it
be
come to me?
Mary, I think, right?
Yeah, I think
think
I'm a
so.
no. Yeah, I'm a no on this.
Okay, Janet.
I'm still confused. We're gonna leave it the way it was last year
Well,
versus,
that's the motion is to, leave
Well-
it as it is in the budget, which is basically the way it was similar to last year.
Right, the way it's printed in the budget on line 11, as Margaret has on the screen right now. But with the breakdown of,
yeah, I can I abstain? I don't, it really, no, seriously, I have no feeling one way or the other. I'm sorry. I guess I'll say I'll say yes. I'm fine with leaving it the way it was.
Julie.
Okay. Yes. Say aye.
I'm aye.
So motion passes 4-1.
Mary, can I ask may I ask for a minority report? I just would like to understand. I would like to understand your thoughts.
Well, I think the thing that, because a chunk of it as it stands is supposed to come from raise and appropriate, and then we have the business of funding negotiated compensation. It's sort of like, I don't know that it belongs in that bucket. I think that's my sense of it.
Okay.
If it was cleaner, if it was just coming from free cash, I'd probably feel better about it.
Yeah. Because at last year, it's true, last year's was fully funded from free cash. So, yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you for that.
Yeah, and it's not a strong thing. It's just there it is. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, Stan, where do you want to go next? Oh, back to the summary, right? Or back to the income ladder? There's another.
I think so. Back to the summary.
Oh, back to the summary. Okay. This one or the income ladder? Where you?
No, the income ladder.
Okay, the income ladder. Okay, here's the income ladder. All right.
Who's laughing in the background there?
That sounds like June, or is it Janet?
It did sound
No,
like
it
Jim.
wasn't me this time. I swear to God, it wasn't me.
Okay.
Janet's on mute.
So the other thing that has changed since you last met, or since you last went over the spreadsheet, is that Dennis got approval. This is the other highlighted item here. He got approval to pay off the Water Pollution Abatement Trust loan, which is an interest-free loan to the town, where residents were able to borrow money to do Title V septic repairs. This is now being closed out. We're in the last 2 years here, but Dennis has gotten permission to pay off the loan from the loan proceeds. So we've got $4,308 remaining in revenues, available revenues to fund the actual principal, which is shown. It's a direct offset, $4,308 on revenues, $4,308 to pay off the loan and expenses. And again, it's interest free. It's only showing on principal. So I just wanted to, that's really the only other update that we have here since you last reviewed the spreadsheet. Any questions on that? There's your debt exclusion numbers.
No. What's that?
There's your debt exclusion numbers on the bottom here that were
Right.
carried to the summary sheet. The obligations, there's $250,000 planned to be set aside for abatements and exemptions. And that's the allowance for abatements and exemptions. And this would, there are sufficient funds. There's enough carried forward overlay surplus to be able to fund potentially large abatement requests or granted abatement requests, particularly those from commercial where they'd be of high value potentially. So
With
we're
this
just gonna do-
added, was it going to be like 600,000 we'd have total?
That's about right. Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. I think it's a little over that.
Yeah.
June's a little over that, right?
Working on it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So what else on revenues here? State aid, as you know, the administrative finance team is recommending going with the governor's proposed FY22 budget local aid numbers. But we're level funding where he's saying we're going to increase local aid by 3.5%. So we're going with level funding from actual FY21 revenues. And now that the federal government is passing the additional COVID relief bill, I think there's a potential that we're going to even see more because there is going to be money that's going to go to state and local governments. So we potentially could see more than that. So I feel confident that that those estimates are conservative enough and safe estimates. You can see we've got decreases again in our local receipts. We don't know what to
415,000 currently in overlay right now.
415
So
plus 250. Yeah, so there, okay, so it's good. It's a healthy balance. Does anybody have any questions on these projections? We've taken a conservative approach again this year. I guess we shall see, as our actuals come in for the current year, we're going to see how we're trending on some of these bigger ticket items. Motor vehicle excise, the commitment is, the payment is due on this big commitment. Is it next week? I think it actually might be next week. So we might have more information on that soon to see how we're doing on the motor vehicle excise collections. Licenses and permits, we're still doing well again on the residential side anyway.
Actually, our building inspector had made a comment that it's way up actually over what he expected. So
A lot of residential building.
But I'd still like to stay conservative,
Yeah.
just in case.
And you can see that the meals and hotel, the meals and rooms excise, which we're probably going to have to break out in the future. We'll probably have to add, probably have to do a separate meals excise and rooms excise line because they are reported separately on the recap. So
Well, we didn't have rooms, I don't think, until recent, right?
that's
That is
right.
correct.
So,
That's
so
right. And yeah, it's just a piddly little amount now. So where else do you want to go on revenues?
I think we should just go to the summary sheet and vote to approve
Okay.
those line items.
Okay, here's the summary sheet. Okay, so we're up top here and you can see all the way down to, you can see the bottom line net revenues and the expense budget bottom line.
Do you want to go over the other expenses? I know you sent it out, the email today about the cemetery, the highway piece. I know it was pretty clear in that letter, but maybe just
Yeah.
quick.
So yeah, so the cemetery, there's not going to be any impact on the revenue side whatsoever with either of those changes the board voted on Monday night. But cemetery expenses, the idea behind that is that it is going to, there are a couple of things. It should improve cost efficiency and staffing capacity. by moving the expenses for contracted groundskeeping, which are currently paid at $32 an hour, to highway part-time wages, which would be paid at about $20 an hour. And it would be a part-time, it's added to the part-time wages line. And it would only fund a position at about 15 to 16 hours a week. So it would be a part-time, non-benefited. There wouldn't be any additional benefits added to that. So the board voted to move $16,000 from cemetery expenses to highway department part-time wages for FY22, to have the highway department start doing the mowing, the groundskeeping and maintenance at the cemeteries. Cemetery Commission will still have some responsibilities for superintendency, and they also still have funds for extraordinary repairs to equipment. So if they have to actually send the equipment out, and not because the highway department doesn't have the capacity to repair it, then the cemetery expense line would still fund that. As far as the other line, it is the there had been a lot of discussion with the board in recent meetings about the wheat assessment line. So it's been called wheat assessment since the town contracted with wheat for social services to Berlin residents. It's a regional agency. And one of the board members wanted to make that line more broadly meet Berlin residents' needs. So for residents in need, rather than just confining the expense line to the wheat assessment, to expand it to maybe provide other services to Berlin residents in need. So my recommendation to the board on Monday night was to move $3,000 from the select board's expense line to a newly named, I think it's called Community Social Services line. So that would replace the name wheat assessment. So you'll see that in the expense budget, but neither of those affect the revenues. And I did put the letters in your, I uploaded them to the budget folder as well.
The 3,000 coming from the selectmen's expense budget, was that, I mean, are they expecting some type of other cut, or is this money that was going to some type of social services already?
No, it was not money going to social services. The select boards, I included the select board's expenditure history report in your folder too. And the select board's expense line has been underspent in the past few years. You'll see in the expense history that the select board's expense line a few years ago, I think it was increased by like $10,000. And that was, I think it was to pay town administrator consultant, search consulting firm. And then it was dropped, but the select board's expense line has been underspent since. So the board agreed to move $3,000 of their $8,500 something budget over to the community services line.
And how is that money for the community service going to be like distributed or spent or dispersed, I guess is the correct word?
Well, so the desire was to provide social services to Berlin residents. However, where we don't have the capacity with our small staffing, my idea in the letter, I just gave an example of how we might be able to use the $3,000. My thought in the letter was that we could prepare a community social services resource guide and mail it out to residents in town. That's something that we would have the capacity to do, aside from actually providing direct social services to residents. We are not legally allowed to provide direct funding to residents under the state constitution. So that's not an opportunity for us, but to do something to actually get contact information for social service agencies and organizations is something that we could do. So I suggested that, and they welcomed that as a first step.
So do we need to vote on revenue line by line, or can we vote on them as a lump?
don't know. June, do you have any preference? I'm sorry. Through the
No,
chair.
I
June,
mean,
do you have any accountant?
I don't know as far as revenues, as far as if that's a real vote per se, but however you want to do it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, actually, that's a good question. Yeah, I don't feel like we have
The
necessarily
revenues are
voted
the
on revenues
revenues,
before.
because I
Yeah.
don't mean to sound rude when I say this, but
We don't have
when we go
control
to
over
do,
'em.
when we do the recap sheet, we use real numbers. So it's,
These are
Right.
projections. This is why
Yeah.
we call them projections. But they're overall pretty
is
darn
repeat
conservative
generated.
projections.
Well, okay, but so I guess my other question would be is if we're on the summary sheet, I mean, I think we do have some say over what we use for new growth and what we would use for.
Not
I mean,
on new
those-
growth. New growth is new growth based on what the figures are given to the state.
If we're projecting,
But we're projecting a number.
if we're projecting $200,000 in new growth and the town doesn't see $200,000 in new growth, then that would be money added to the property taxes used. That's the whole idea of it here. The property taxes used plus new growth is the amount that's going to be levied across the entire tax base. So if we don't hit the $200,000 in new growth, it would be money that's reflected up here.
And vice versa.
And you can see what our new growth was actually in FY21 right here.
Do you need a vote over just for the overall total budget? Or I'm just going by my own past experience. We went through we did provide one for the overall budget, but we also did a vote. I don't know if people are still doing this, but we went actually through each line item in the budget. So it wasn't even category 100 for expenses. It was each item. Just to see where people's disagreements were, if there were any, when it came time to doing the overall budget vote. But I don't know what you've done in the past. I mean, most of the things are
I think-
non-controversial, so it usually goes rather quickly. But
I think FinCom went line by line last year too.
Yeah, we did.
yeah, because I think probably like the
We
one that's still
definitely
funny-
grouped some of them, though. I know that.
I think we grouped them like fire and safety or whatever safety, whatever, however that category is. We grouped them by category.
Right, I should say by that. It
Yeah,
wasn't
can
like,
we-
right, we
can
didn't
we
do a
go
separate
to
vote
that
for
section
full-time and
now?
part-time
Because,
wages.
Like public safety, we did it that way. And
I think last year you guys did it as it was approved by the selectmen and it came over. You guys did
Right.
like low hanging fruit and then a
Yeah,
few more the
that's-
next time. But unfortunately, it's down to the wire now where they're all there. However you guys wish to do it.
let's just start and get them done.
I was wondering if we wanted to tackle anything that's controversial, and I don't know if we've resolved the Tohoto assessment item yet.
I would say we have not resolved that.
Yes. Do we want to discuss that, what we know is a issue first? Or you want to just go through the easy stuff and then get to the hard stuff? I have no preference.
Well, I mean, you could also argue that because we're presenting that right now it's at a balanced budget. Is there an issue? you could even start with that. You could start, is there anything controversial?
Well, usually it comes down to it still comes down to there is we are at the 2.5%, but we are still going to be right now targeting to raise the tax levy by 2.5%. So, it's
Correct.
one of those things, just because you are at you guide in at 2.5%, some may not be, thinking that at this particular time, that this is a time to push people's taxes up an additional 2.5%. So
We don't want to get off the curve, Scott. We
I
gotta,
know,
we gotta
but
stay on the curve.
but that's so coming, I guess, to Tohoto. I mean, what do we do we want to discuss that now or wait until we get that line item?
Let's wait since it's at the end. See if we can get through. Let's see if we can get through some things without beating them to the point of a bloody pulp. I think we could talk about the moderator's salary. How about we approve that?
Well, couldn't we just look at what that first, like, general government's 100? So you could maybe do like all the way down to maybe FinCom expenses. So we could say 1 through, what is it?
Fine.
So we can go like
17.
this.
Isn't that kind of what we did last year? I don't remember.
Yes, that is what we did. That's my recollection anyway.
Yeah, I mean, can we look at like maybe the top, I don't know, what is there? The top 11 or, and then, because that, and then we get into the others.
There you go. You've already taken action on the contingency line item.
Right.
So there you go.
So it's the top 10. Haha, I like that.
So make a motion.
So I make a motion to approve under 100 general government 1 through 10. Selectman's salary, town administrator's salary, expense. Well, I don't really, do I have to do all of that out? And I can. 1 through 10. So it's going to be moderator salary and expenses, selectman's salary, full-time, part-time consulting and expenses, town administrative salary and expenses, FinCom expensive, and reserve fund. How's that? Did I do that okay,
Why
Julie?
wouldn't you include line 11? Since
We
we've
already
already
did that
decided it.
one.
we
Yeah,
didn't.
but we didn't do it in the budget, Jen. I think.
Oh, okay,
on this
excuse
expense
me,
sheet.
number 11 contingency line item, which I think we can take out temporary, or are we leaving that?
I'd like to think that it's temporary and it's not going to stay
I
another.
just didn't know.
At least for the next
Okay.
20 years or so.
We're,
Yeah.
we're just hoping COVID goes away and
So Julie, did you get that, or do you want me to repeat it?
It's okay. I'll go back and watch the tape.
Yeah.
The
So,
video.
Well, it was kind of a fun.
Otherwise, I'm a slow writer. We might be here till like midnight.
But yeah, I mean, you could just make a note that just says 1 through 11, Julie. You don't have to go. You don't have to
Yeah.
say.
I
I mean,
was
it's
just
nice that they're
thinking
all
it out
numbered, so
loud
it's pretty
for
easy
people
to.
that may not
Okay.
be able to see what we're doing.
Okay.
So it's general government 1 through 11.
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, excuse me.
I'll
Did I hear a
second that.
second?
I'll second it.
Scott seconded. Do we have any
Well, Scott
further
did, okay.
discussion? Oh, too late. Scott already seconded. Any discussion on any of these?
No.
No.
Roll call vote. Stan, aye.
Mary, I.
Janet, I.
Julie, I.
Scott, I.
Motion passes unanimously.
We're going to move it on up. Thank you. And
We're rolling now.
there we go. Here.
All right.
Okay. Lines 12 through, what do you want to do? Lines 12 through 25?
That takes us down through treasurer.
All the way to
and
legal
through legal
expenses.
expense. Yeah, sure. I will. I will have some discussion though on this one. But does someone have a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept line item 12 through 25. It's the accountant, audit, assessor, reval, treasurer, and legal expenses.
I'll second.
So my question, Margaret, is was there any discussion on the legal expenses as to whether, are we literally just carrying the number because it seems like a good thing, or was there discussion that we would have similar, was there an actual discussion about what we thought we might spend on legal, or was it just a carry forward?
Well, $50,000 is carried forward as a level funded expense line. However, and we're not overspending, thankfully. We
Yeah,
are
that was
on.
gonna be my next question to June, is where we're at this year.
Yeah, June actually just reported that, and I can't remember what June reported. But
If
with
only
the
she was
collective-
around.
yeah, with the, I think that the number, my recommendation to FinCom would be that the number stay at $50,000 to assure that we have sufficient funds to pay legal and general counsel.
We've spent 21,000 through March 1st,
Okay,
which
so
is
we-
actually through January bills.
yes.
Don't we have something that's pretty consistent in that area though, don't we? That's for something that we're doing on.
It's under the consultant line
Yeah.
item now.
Yes, yeah,
Oh, that's
That's-
right. Sorry.
that's
Yep,
moved.
thank you.
No problem.
Yep, no, my error.
we'll be incurring more expenses with the collective bargaining agreements and some general counsel expenses with town meeting coming up. We have the legal review of the warrant done and all that. So
Where's the address?
Stan, I think we're on track to not
Okay.
overspend.
Any further discussion on this group? Hearing none, roll call vote. Stan, aye.
Mary, I.
Janet, I.
Julie, aye.
God, I.
Motion passes unanimously. Why don't we go down through? Keep going, please.
Keep going? Okay.
Well, actually, why don't we go through, how about a motion through, well, Concom is not, that's the time, actually, they don't have anything, they're very minimal budget. I guess all of these are, none of these are, sorry, my eyes are really getting bad.
I can magnify.
Can
it a
you
little.
go
How's
back
that?
up, Margaret, just where we just left off so I can just see?
25, yes, I can do
I'm
that.
sorry.
Yeah, Margaret, if you could jump that a couple more would be helpful. I think it'll still fit on the screen.
Oh, down?
No, if you could expand it a little bit more, and I think it'll still fit
Okay. How's that?
for people with bad eyes like me. Yeah, there you go.
That's
All
why
right,
I
so
keep
Janet-
shutting my thing off.
Okay, this is where you're
Yeah.
starting this time.
Sorry.
We
Personnel.
don't see you squinting the whole time like I'm doing.
Well,
Yeah,
I
so
don't want you looking up my nose.
Can't think of what else I'd rather do on a Wednesday
I
night,
know,
Jim.
I know. I'm sorry.
Things to look forward to.
No kidding.
All right, so $1,000 increase under town clerk, right? No. Wait a minute, what am I looking at?
There's a $1,600 decrease
Change,
under
2%.
elections.
Right, okay.
Yeah. Not a state election year.
How did, I just out of curiosity, because this is when you said town clerk, that is one
Yeah.
salary that I really think we're gonna get
Mhm.
nailed on when, and she
Mhm.
can't retire until I retire. That's all I'm saying. I hope she's listening. Because what was the comp on that? Just out of curiosity.
I can tell you that, just a second. I have to dig it out. Okay. Town clerk. I can tell you where the town clerk is. The problem is the comp for town clerk, because she's an elected position, is not, oh, yes, no, I'm sorry, not true. 11, okay, let me just I'll tell you. Comp would be, for a full-time position, step 1, The salary is $63,980.
And is she full-time?
Eloise is 20 hours a week. Well, she's supposed to be 20 hours a week.
Well, that's
Right,
the
yeah.
problem right there in a
Right.
nutshell, is she's
Yeah.
working well over her
Yep.
20 hours. So if you look at that and you're saying full-time is 60, so part-time
Yeah.
is 31, it's a wash. But nobody is going to work the amount of hours to get the job done that she does at 20 hours. That's my
yeah.
concern. Are you agreeing with me here, Margaret?
I do agree with you. I absolutely agree with you, but I also think that it's incumbent upon the official to, to bill for bill for the time to actually, and as an elected official to request a salary that she feels appropriate. So
I understand that, and I know we've
Yeah.
had this discussion before, but my fear is what's going to happen if and when we ever have to.
the town's going to be spending a lot more money. If the position goes to appointed at a higher number of hours, or another elected position comes in and they report the actual number of hours they're working and request a salary that's commensurate with that, then we're going to be spending more money. That's
Okay,
it.
well, I just was
Yeah.
curious what the comp came in at. That's all.
Yeah.
But I can't see this.
Yeah, Janet, I share your sympathies on it, but Margaret's exactly right.
Oh, I totally agree. I totally agree. And we'll just have to, when we come to it, we'll have to figure it out.
Mm.
Okay, so I'll make a motion to
Oh.
accept 20 line item 26 through.
All the way down. Whoa,
Well,
sorry.
no, I think we should just do salaries and then do committees. So I'm gonna make the motion to 37.
Okay.
26 to 37.
I think it's 26. You moved it on me.
I know I did.
Yeah,
That's
yes,
okay.
it was 26.
Was it? I think it was 26 to
26.
26 to 37.
Mhm.
A second.
So what I would chime in on that salary piece is that you could also make the argument that it would behoove us to be fiscally responsible and try to get this position closer to market rate, even on our own, so that we don't have that financial hit. I don't think this is the environment for that, but we did that at church at First Parish when choir directors and organist salaries were below market rate. Then we forced them up, even without the people requesting them, just so that we wouldn't be surprised later on. So there would be precedent. I mean, there's logic to doing it, but I don't think this is the environment. I just wanted to put that out there, that it's not necessarily just because she's not asking for it. It might still be financially responsible for us to put it in. I don't think this is the year to do it, though.
I would
Let's
agree with
see
you.
on next year's budget.
So, any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote. Stan, aye.
Mary, I.
Janet, I.
God, I.
You guys have that down.
Don't we, though?
I am impressed.
Well, then you're easily impressed. Anyway,
All right, heading down to the next section here. Okay, so you'd start at line 38 here.
I'll make a motion to accept 38 through 47 in the general government.
Second that.
any discussion on these fairly non-controversial items? Not that I'm planting that seed or anything, mind you.
Well, I think we always have to look at that electricity bill for that town barn, but
Yeah,
it's up
I know.
it's up 2,000. I hope it covered it.
we can keep saying we wish they had actually put in the electric panels like they were supposed
Yeah.
to. But
Well, they're going to be moving forward on the on the solar consulting piece of it to see if solar's feasible and if they can help us prepare an IFB to do the work. So that'd be interesting.
Well, it better be feasible. We started the whole project thinking it was feasible, so.
I know.
Do they know if the roof can support it? I know that was a concern
According to the
before.
architect, it can.
Okay.
So did someone second? Oh yeah, so we're at discussion. Any further discussion?
No.
Hearing none, roll call, Stan, aye.
Mary, I.
Janet, I.
Julie, I.
Scott, I.
Motion carries unanimously. All right, public safety. I think we should probably, feel like we should do these by group. You know, the public safety, that or police, then fire, then maybe the inspectors could maybe be lumped, but I feel like these are big enough categories that they should be separate. Could have a motion for 48 through 51, maybe. Just a thought. But I can't make it.
I'm reading it. Hold on.
Okay.
I had to take my glasses off.
I figured Janet had volunteered for this part of the job, so leave it to her.
Oh, no, I just was trying to move things along. Although there's no Celtics or hockey on tonight, so I'm okay.
Nothing to distract you.
Hockey
Let's
last
divide
night
your
was
attention.
disappointing
Yeah.
in the end,
Oh, very.
wasn't it?
Ugh.
Oh, well.
What was disappointing?
Hockey, last night's game at the end was disappointing.
It was, but you know, that was actually one of the few losses that I really wasn't overly bitter about, because they hung in there, and
They-
as far as
They did, and the
for as
other one,
decimated as they are, I feel like they showed up.
they did. They did.
Not exactly a year
Excited
ago,
Marcus
but
Smart is back.
Not exactly what, Scott?
well, not exactly a year ago, but it was a Wednesday night. That was the last sports you saw for a long time.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, isn't
Yeah.
today the big anniversary? Or is it coming up?
Tomorrow's the anniversary,
Tomorrow,
but it was a Wednesday.
Ugh, ugh.
All right, I'll make a motion to accept 48 to 51 public safety police salary, wages, full and part-time, and expenses.
Second,
Any discussion? Pretty straightforward, huh?
Understanding that the contracts are to be negotiated.
Right.
Will we come back and visit this, Margaret, after contracts?
Well, you'll be consulted after contracts. I don't know that we'd visit the budget lines themselves because it will already be an approved budget. So we'd have to be counting the adjustments in for next year's for
Okay.
actuals. Yeah, well, for actuals.
All right. I didn't know how quite that went on a negotiating year. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So with that caveat, roll call, Stan, aye.
Mary, I.
Janet, I.
Yeah.
Scott, I.
Motion passes unanimously. So someone for 52 through 55, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. I keep 52 through 55.
I'll make a motion to approve 50 to 52 to 55 fire and EMS salary, full-time wages, part-time, and expenses.
Second,
Any discussion on this section?
No.
Hearing none, roll call vote, Stan, aye.
Mary, I.
Janet, I.
Julie, I.
Scott, I.
So can we do all the inspectors together along with animal control, since these are basically self-funded and there's nothing, well, actually, well, yeah, the plumbing and
Oh,
gas.
that one too. Yeah, okay. at it.
Yeah, well, building inspector is still separate. I mean, right? I mean,
you
it's
wanna
the
do-
plumbing and electrical decks, the
Yeah.
offsets, right?
Plumbing and gas and then electric, right? I guess I'm just lumping them because they're basically funded through fees. So
Okay.
It's not-
plumbing.
Did we ever get the animal inspector salary thing straightened out? That seemed to be an issue last year, and now I'm looking, we have an
Oh, that was
inspector and an officer. What's
I
this?
think it was an issue the year before. Huh?
Was it? No, it was last year, wasn't it?
So animal control officer, the year before last, I guess they were going to be looking at a regionalized service, and there was a
Right.
very large amount of money. It was last year that they decided not to move forward and reduced or put the money back in the salary line. It hadn't been
Yeah.
funded. That's what the issue was.
Yeah,
Yes.
something's different, yeah.
Yeah.
What's the difference between an inspector and a control officer?
The inspector actually has statutory duties for domestic farm animals, so inspections of farms and things like that. Whereas the animal control officer will be the one that's going out and catching loose dogs and investigating dog bites and maybe, picking up an injured bird or something like that. So they both have different statutory duties, but they're not one and the same.
They're one and the same people, right?
They're not one and the
Oh,
same
they're
people
not
either.
one and the same. Oh, okay.
No.
And not that it really matters, but is this all these people do it? Do they do it from multiple towns? So, I mean, is this an actual living for somebody, or is somebody just kind of doing this on a lark?
To my knowledge, these are just standalones. These are just for Berlin, and they're just being paid from these lines. That's it.
Yeah. And also probably for not nearly the number of hours that they're actually working would be a guess on that.
All right, I might as well keep going. I'll make a motion to accept line item. I believe it's not, is it 55 or 56?
56.
56 through 69, but I do have a discussion after.
Second,
Did we ever look at the I don't know how I want to say risk benefit, because that's the medical term
Oh,
for it.
cost
and that's not
benefit?
right.
Cost
But
benefit?
For the communications and dispatch, do we ever look at the cost ratio by moving to Devon's versus keeping it in town? That was a couple people in town asked me
Mhm.
to look into this, and I did ask the question because there are some people in town that really would love to see that area back in town and have
So-
that open again. But I don't know if I ever got that answer.
Did not. I have not gone back in the years and recalculated it to what the cost would be now to do it. It's on the list. It just hasn't been done.
I'm
I
sure
can
you're,
tell you,
it's not like you haven't had a lot to do, Jim.
But I do have to say that I know bringing it back into town would cost us a ton of money, because originally 911 was paid for by the state. And I think bringing it back in-house, it wouldn't be, but
we would have to repay all of the costs that the district received for us to join. We'd have to repay that. And not only that, I don't even think the state, I can't, the state is really, it's state 911. It's the state E911 department. They are really frowning on standalone dispatch centers, and they are really pushing regional dispatch centers.
I'm not for or against it either
Yeah.
way. It was just a question that was asked to me from a couple of the constituents, so I thought I would bring it forth.
it is. I'm
What
hoping
would we
very
have to,
soon.
what would we have to pay back, Margaret?
When we joined the regional dispatch district, the district received a lot of grant money from the state when we joined them.
Oh,
We would
okay.
have to repay those monies.
Okay.
And for any type of analysis on that, June, wouldn't it be just kind of a range? Because one of the biggest unknowns would be if anybody took benefits or not, right?
Well, that's what I'm talking, is that I would have to go back and see what we had, how many full-timers we had, what the insurance costs would be, plus try to figure out what it would cost for the retirees. Because over there, they have retirees' health insurance, I believe. And they're all union now. So there's a lot of little things. I wish I could just go back and say, okay, well, we spent X and Y on wages and expenses and bring it across, but there's also payroll costs and things like that to get an actual overview as to the total cost of what the comm center was costing us originally. But I'm
Right,
planning
and
on
further
still
dis-
doing it just because it's been asked.
Any further discussion on this section? Hearing none, roll call, Stan, aye.
Mary, I.
Janet, I.
Julie, aye.
Scott, I.
Moving down.
So 400 Public Works. I think we can probably do these as a group, no?
Yeah, 70 to 81.
Yeah,
Here's where you see the shift in the budget lines. I highlighted them in yellow.
right, but it's just a straight offset, right, for this year?
It is. It's 16,000 from one and 16,000 into the other.
Right.
Well, I thought maybe the trash, or I shouldn't know, excuse me, the transfer station would have been a little bit more, considering we're paying more to get rid of trash. But they good for them.
Yeah, I think we've absorbed that as a cost, and I don't think it's continually rising. I think there was a kind of a big jump last year, and I think
Good.
it's been relatively stable.
Okay, let's go on then.
Margaret, do you know
400
anything more about that?
Public Works Facilities. Line items 70 through 81.
Second.
Margaret, do you know anything more about transfer station expenses? If they're,
Oh, I'm sorry, Stan.
Yeah, what I could,
that's okay.
June,
As part of the discussion.
June, are you able to pull expenses to date if you have Vadar in front of you? I can
know
tell you that
we're supposed to have realized savings by having the second compactor, and that they only have to empty it when it's full. And I mean, I think that they've done that stuff, and I don't think that there's been a big jump year over year. There was last year from the year before, but I don't think there's been a big jump this year.
No, I don't believe so. I don't think they have fully expended. I don't think they fully expended their line either.
They've spent about 71,300-ish so far through
January.
that is through actually the beginning of March, so that's through February.
Good.
Yep.
So they're well
Okay.
well within.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. And I think the only thing we get anything for now is the metal, right? I think everything else we're paying basically, or the cardboard might be a wash, but I think everything else we're paying
Started giving us a little bit of credits for things again, like they used to, but very minimal, like a couple $100 a month, if that.
Right. Well, better than a sharp stick in the eye, I guess. Okay. Any further discussion on the Public Works section? Hearing none, roll call, Stan, aye.
Mary, I.
Janet, I.
Julie, aye.
Scott, I.
All right, Human Services, can we do this as a group, or is there anything controversial here? We have a fairly big jump in Council on Aging. So we can, I mean, we can do this as a group and then we can just discuss that section. So can I have a motion
Is
for
it-
the,
I'll make a
Well, can we get
motion
it-
to
just can we
accept
just-
500
yeah.
Human Services 82 through 92.
Second.
okay, discussion. Why is this, why is the COA wage changed so much?
Was
Yeah,
it
the
more
C-
hours
The
in wages?
no,
Yeah.
the COA director position was significantly under market, significantly under market. In fact, there's we still have a pending contingency line transfer for her market rate adjustment this year. So just to put her on the lower end of the scale for the market comps for COA directors, it required a large dollar per hour increase in her wages.
And may I say, I have heard nothing but wonderful things from the seniors of all the wonderful things she is doing for them.
Victoria is frankly wonderful. She's wonderful, and she has stepped up so much. But anyway, that's beside the point. Now we're talking wages, but Stan, the adjustment is strictly to put her within the market range. That's it.
And it's
Right.
still the very low end, if I remember correctly, when I looked at
It
those
is.
comps.
It is still low. Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, but so refresh my, why do we do some of these through this consultant? And then we had this discussion about Eloise. And so is it the distinction between appointed and elected? Is that the difference?
That particular one is a difference between appointed and elected. Eloise could request a higher salary. She's an elected official, so she could request a higher salary.
So that's
I
not
mean-
something that the consultant would look at and say that this position, that a town of this size, this person or this
No, she-
position, even though it's elected, should be at this many hours. So we should be market adjusting this to the level of work that there is. Maybe not necessarily the pay per se, but they don't do that.
That's a good question, Stan, but the consultant was not contracted to look at the number of hours required, only the market rates, the market
Rates.
comps.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have to also say Eloise is very leery about asking for additional funding.
Correct. And I get that.
Mm.
I just wanted to make it, I wanted to know why the distinction. I didn't know
Yeah.
what the contract was and what it
Yeah.
covered.
Did
So
I
you see
miss
Because I mean, I
anything?
think that could be a discussion. I mean, that could be something where that if people are asking
Mhm.
why a particular thing is, and we say that we have a study that, suggests that this is this, and it might be we might need to further explain it. That's all.
So you see the line 92, that's the former wheat assessment.
Right.
And that's the money extra that the selectmen
That-
transferred. Yeah.
that's
what I
correct.
thought. Yeah.
But now going forward, so funding that after this year, though, there won't be that money available from the select board or what, right?
Oh, no,
I
this
mean,
isn't, no,
that
this
was a
wouldn't be,
one-time from there.
no, well, there wouldn't be the transfer again, but the select board's expense line would start at that new lower baseline. You know what I mean? This
Well, right, but
$7,000.
community and social services would stay at presumably would stay at the 7,000 next year
Yeah.
and would not be partially funded through some other line item.
Right.
Who essentially would be running this? You mentioned talking about preparing the community resource guide. Who
Well,
is over the?
good question. I have someone who is backfilling for staff in the office right now, who's been helping out, and she's actually putting it together using a template from another municipality in Massachusetts. So she's actually doing it now well, not now as we speak, but she's working on it now. So she's compiling it. The cost here would be to actually print it and mail it.
And I'm sure Victoria had a tremendous amount of resources that just need
Well.
to be put public.
Yeah.
you know?
That's right. That's right. And so they could all be bundled into this guide. Yeah. And
And you
again,
know- yeah.
this was just an idea on my, for $3,000, you're not going to get a whole lot, but what could we do to try to reach as many residents as possible? And this was just a thought I had.
And the little Berlin phone book, which in the
Yeah.
back has a lot of resources in it, but
That's a good
not
point.
everybody purchases the phone book. And to the best of my knowledge, the Historical Society did not do it for 2020.
Nope.
It's so that is not now getting updated. So this resource is coming in a very a timely and crucial a time in our society. So I think it's a great idea.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call, Stan, aye.
Mary, I.
Janet, I.
Julie, I.
Scott, aye.
And
Culture and recreation. This, I think, could certainly all be done as a group, right?
Pretty flat to me. I'll make a
That's it.
motion. Cultural and recreation, 93 to 99.
Second,
So the library wages, was that a consultant thing as well?
yes,
Yes.
that was also a market adjustment for a few different positions at the library. Yeah.
Okay.
Something the trustees have been trying to do for years, but unfortunately we didn't have anything to go by other than our own little research, knowing we were having underpaid. So that's great that they acknowledge that.
Yeah, is that the director plus, Margaret, or is that just?
It's
Yeah,
the
it's-
director. It's the director. Oh
The
gosh.
children's librarian, right?
Youth services librarian.
Yeah.
Thought
And
there was one more.
maybe it was the, was it the circulation? No,
I know
technical,
who
technical
it is.
services
Yeah, yeah,
librarian.
yeah.
Okay.
It's the 3 top positions in the library.
Okay.
And
Any
really,
further
if you look at it,
right.
it's what, 4.5% over 3 people. Oh. All right, sorry.
No, I mean, it's just, it's stands out among other categories that were all
Absolutely.
flatline. So. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call, Stan, aye.
Mary, I.
Janet, I.
Uh-oh.
We
Julie
lost
fall asleep?
Julie.
Did we lose Julie?
No, Julie's here. I
Oh,
said
okay.
aye.
There she is.
yeah, Scott,
Oh.
aye.
There we go.
There we go.
All
I
right.
blew out.
I think so. I think you dropped out. You were all trying to make it anonymous instead of unanimous. So anyway,
Okay, so moving down, debt and
Yeah.
debt and interest.
So this is the yellow highlighting is the Water Pollution Abatement Trust adjustment of $2,154, I believe that is.
No, it's a lot more than that.
Oh, no. This just reflects the increase of 2,000, what is it, $2,154 from the original request. Dennis submitted a revised request for us.
Right, but this is because of the lab truck we paid off.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
That ladder truck, see how much the took off there?
Yeah. All right, did we have a motion? And was it
I might as
seconded?
well keep going, right? I'll make a
Might
motion
as well
to
be.
accept debt and interest 100 and 101.
Second that.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote, Stan, aye.
Mary, I.
Janet, I.
Julie, I.
Scott, aye.
Now we come to the fun section. All right, meeting adjourned. Perfect. Can I slip it in now? Can I slip
Recess.
that in now?
I make a motion to adjourn. I'm kidding,
Oh.
I'm kidding, I'm kidding, I'm kidding. Can we actually even do section 800, or do we leave that and then come back to it? I'm still at
Well, we
a,
can skip it. I mean, we can vote the other section and come back and just leave that at the end. But there's only one other section after it. It's the benefits and insurance.
well, I'm a little behind on this section because of Monday night, so I apologize.
Well, but we also didn't resolve anything. So you didn't, it's not, I mean, yes, I guess you are, but it doesn't mean that we still need to resolve it. So,
Do we have
I
time
think
to
that
leave it?
if you have thoughts on it, you could bring them forward at that discussion time, or we can have a 10 to 15 minute discussion before we even have a motion, so that we're not just trying to adjust a motion too. So
I guess my question is, do we have to finish this tonight?
well, we have to make our recommendations by the end of next week, right, Margaret? By the end of the meeting.
Yeah, next week is your last, you have to finish up next week, yes.
So I'm just wondering what, this is it, right? 900, there's nothing after 117, I can't see.
Correct. There's not. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, there might be one. I don't know.
That's
Yeah,
it.
no, that's it.
Okay,
But do we have to? I mean, there's not going to be this go back to the departments, and other than if we go back to the schools. So I guess that's the question, Janet. Is this is the only one where it would require further action, and so that means this is the one that would have to be acted on tonight, because there's no time to act on it if we wait until next week. We can't go
oh,
say
I
next
see, I
week.
see, yep, I got it,
We'll take
sorry.
it back, and then that was where we kind of.
Well, I mean,
logged
you can act on it by, if we determine there was a certain dollar amount that we wanted to cut a line item by, and just reduce it to that amount and just let them know what it is, and then they have to move forward to find their savings.
Well, right, but you're saying we could do that next week, or we should do that this week?
Well, I think it would be the sooner the better, but I mean,
Right.
if it has to be done next week, I mean, it could be next week.
Well, would it be fair to, I mean, I don't know, you all were at the meeting, what is your feelings on all of this? I'm behind the 8 ball, I apologize.
But Janet, the one thing that for me, after Monday's discussion is the only thing that I think is controversial is the Tohoto assessment. Stan can tell me I'm wrong on the.
You're wrong, Mary.
Yeah, but I'll give Stan's, which is we're shorting capital improvement this year to kind of make things float. But the actual, when you look at the actual percents for each of the buckets, I really think it's the Tohoto assessment that was of concern. And they got the number, they got that percent to 6.6% for the Tohoto assessment in part by factoring in savings on bond financing. And, so it was, so the underlying question is, are you going to continue to have that kind of operating expense at Tohoto, that kind of increase? And Berlin only added 1 student. Boylston lost, count went down 9, I think. But when you look at the proportion of Berlin and Boylston, it doesn't account. The 6.6% really is an increase in operating costs at Tohoto. But a piece of that increase, I think, is directly related to a conservative estimate on state aid, on Chapter 70 state aid, which their budget shows as dropping 47,000. From year on year, fiscal 21 to fiscal 22.
I learned. Oh, I'm sorry, Mary. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm finished. Thank you.
I learned something this week, because I was looking at the state aid for the district, and I ran the numbers that they had in their presentation against what DLS shows on their preliminary cherry sheets. And I was coming up with a variance of like $26,000. And so I asked Bob Conry about it, and he responded that they use DESI's preliminary cherry sheet numbers. Now, I have absolutely this is the first I had heard that that DESI's preliminary cherry sheet numbers would differ from the Department of Revenues. So
who is Desi? Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education.
Ah, okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
so they actually go straight to the school. And so I unfortunately, I haven't had time to look further into it to find out why there would be a difference between the two, but there was definitely a difference of about $26,000. And Bob also mentioned that with respect to the Tohoto capital assessment, he said there is a potential that the refinancing, and I know this is the capital assessment, but he said there's a potential for an additional $45,000 in savings, of which Berlin would see about a third, or $15,300 in savings on that line. So
Additional.
additional, yeah, I wanted to
Right.
share that.
And you mentioned the 26K variance. Was that up or down?
It would be more state aid applied to our budget. So it would be for DLS, it was up. On the numbers that we would use, it's up. The numbers that they're using are more conservative.
And they're 26,000. Oh, okay. So that's the numbers that they use of being down 47,000 is using that those numbers. Yeah. So if it really was okay.
Yeah.
That's very helpful, Margaret. I appreciate that, because it points out the uncertainty, and that's a big uncertainty. And it really does drive that 6.6%, a large piece of it. So
right. So Janet, something else to keep in mind is that they basically, in their presentation, and I think you saw their presentation, was that there was, or maybe you didn't, I'm not sure, but
I did.
So they're saying that there's 4 key drivers to driving that 6.6% increase. Special education as a category, special education transportation, and then the reduction in this state aid, and then the negotiated teachers' salaries / position increases and what have you. So they were up about 370 or something, or 340. It was over 300, and a full half of it was stuff that was relatively under their control, which would be the teachers, salaries and funding positions, and basically them kind of working the budget. And then the other 3 are basically out of their control. Like, they don't have a lot of, and then you certainly are well versed in this, and that they don't have a lot of control over special education, and that was a big flip from the year before. So it's a double whammy. I mean, the year before it was reduced from the prior year, so it actually made the number better. This year it's flipped beyond and gone the other way, so that it's twice the effect. The special education transportation has gone up, which is again also the assessment, which again is not necessarily under their control. And now, so we can say that they do have control over some things, and we can say that they have to try to absorb all that stuff. Or we can say that they shouldn't be so conservative on ther revenues, and we're going to be okay anyway, and we could plug it in at a higher revenue number and have it be a lower cost to the town if that happens. But I guess the bottom line is that they have achieved. They were given a directive to not increase their assessment to Berlin by more than 2.5%. They came in at 2.6. They did it partially through reducing capital expenditures, so putting off capital projects, and they've done it through bond refinancing. Now, you could say that the bond refinancing is a bit of a financial gimmick and that it's not a sustainable thing, but it actually is. They're refinancing it, and so the cost for that is actually going down over the life of the bond, which means it's going down. Each year it's a new baseline lower number. So, it was a way to creatively balance, or, quote, hit their number, which they did. But it does not take away from the fact that 6.6 is not sustainable. we can't continue to have Tohono go up by 6% every year. And you're not going to have another refined savings of 3% or whatever, to take it down next year. So, having said that, they don't have a lot of control over special education. They have circuit breaker money and they have funds, but it's going to be what it's going to be.
Yeah, and unfortunately, well, it does speak highly to our school system. People want to move into Berlin and Boylston because of the education they're getting. And it has always been said that living in Berlin, it was like getting a private education at the public sector rate, basically, because of, our children benefit to that. I'm just saying, so when you have people moving into town for the educational piece.
Yep.
Yeah, I think most people's looked at from the student teacher ratios, especially at BMS being so small, it had some very low student to teacher ratios. Of course, there was a penalty of that. There is a lack of other things that you can access in our system because it is so small. But yeah, I think the big point here was that lines items 106 through 109 combined is what they hit our, well, I think it was at 2.6, right? Not at 2.5. They were close.
Right.
And of course, they used lines 107 and 109, where 109 is large part is the bond. I think we said X around 41,000, and maybe it's going to be 15,000 even higher.
Right.
But they used the other, say, 14,000 there and the 27,000 in Berlin Capital to hit that 2.6 number, as opposed to their operating costs being that 2.5 number.
I understand it all. It just makes me wonder what we're in for next year.
Well,
true.
Okay, so go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, it stands out because it's a line item here, but let's also not forget that when we asked the town for level funded budgets, Margaret, I'm sure you could speak to this, that we've put off doing things this year that we would have done if we weren't level funded. So we could say that they shouldn't be putting off this $27,000 in capital, because I'm starting to come around to starting to think this. I was thinking initially, well, we don't want them to put off capital improvements because we don't want we don't want the school to deteriorate, but in a COVID year, we've asked other town departments to basically hold the line on things, and so this is equivalent. The schools are doing an equivalent thing. They're not expending things that they could have. So kudos to them.
I have a question for FinCom. So where there is a likelihood that Berlin will see an additional $15,300 in savings in the debt refinancing, would the Finance Committee be inclined at all to recommend a lower number in that line? And would the Finance Committee be interested in sending the school district a joint letter with the select board about concerns of the unsustainable increases in the operating budget assessments, so they can prepare for next year and know exactly where the town stands and that it cannot sustain these types of increases? Loaded question.
Yeah, I mean, yes, absolutely. I will go on record as saying that I like both of those ideas.
I mean, it also implies that even, BMS, that's at 4.2 also.
Yeah, right.
I just looked at the school district slides again. I just flipped through them, and I don't see that they unpack the expenses year on year.
What a wonderful idea to ask them to do that.
Yeah, because then that's much more important than the overall budget to me, because of the question on revenue, Margaret.
Right, yeah.
Yep.
So that can go in the letter, but that we want to see it presented that way next year.
Well, Stan, I think if their expenses year on year are maybe not at 6.6, or maybe they simply reflect the special education change, for example.
Mhm.
So it's like a footnote, and maybe, and I think that's something that is a wild card year to year, depending on what the population is like in the school community. So then, I'd like to find a way where what they gave us is consistent with what we asked them for, even though that final wrap-up number is not 2.5. I listened to them. I acknowledge very much the irritation about they're not timely and blah, blah, blah. But I think, I think I try to get to what is actually happening here.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I think that's what we want to focus on is how did the expenses year on year, what are they looking like?
Mhm.
Mary, June and I were talking about the same exact thing. That is not at all an unreasonable request to ask them for more budget detail, because it's really hard to.
I do know from, being in a school system and, in my world of pediatrics, that the special ed department could get hit with one student that could virtually cost them $250,000, and there is nothing they can do to change that. But for us to see that would explain it versus trying to figure it out guessing ourselves. It's a good suggestion, Mary.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it doesn't hurt to keep the pressure on that Stan, you said, Margaret, and Stan said, yeah, that we can't sustain that kind of increase. We can take it, if there's a particular issue that year, but we can't have it look like that every year. It's not an expectation we want the district to go away with.
Mm-hmm. All right, we'll see if there's consent from the finance committee. I'll see if I can put together a letter that the finance committee and select board could send jointly.
June's got her hand up.
Oh,
I have a question. In the Assabet assessment, do they include, I call them special articles, capital type projects at all? At Tohoto?
Yes, because they had something they fixed last year or the year before. They had something going on over there, I remember, and I think it was in there. What was it?
Tohoto, June, or Assabet?
No, Assabet.
No, I'm talking Tohoto.
Oh, you said Assabet.
You said
Oh, I'm
Assabet
sorry.
assessment.
I'm sorry.
Because of the Assabet, it did include it. I don't remember Tohoto, so I'll stop now because I was talking Assabet.
So
I know you were
do
saying
that
we
again,
don't.
June. So the question is whether they
My
had.
question is that do they have any capital projects included in the Tohoto assessment that they could possibly postpone until next year?
Well, I think they have, because their financing only saved 41. So
The
they've deferred some.
financing, but the refinancing of the capital, that is the repayment for the
Right.
loan for the
Right.
school.
mm-hmm.
Well,
Only.
Right.
they didn't
So-
come to capital planning for, but this year
But
would
they
be the year
wouldn't.
they wouldn't come, so we wouldn't know what they're doing because
Right, I
they're now,
mean-
yeah, you're right, yeah.
Berlin Memorial, we have, a separate line for capital assessments for projects. But I was just curious with Tohoto, is there anything that they're planning on doing up there that's a capital type thing that could possibly be postponed until next year?
And that cost, it appears, would be reflected in their operating assessment, right, June? Because
That's what I'm
all of the assessment under capital is the excluded debt.
Correct.
I don't.
Okay.
But I thought we said that their savings was 40,000 something from the refi.
Well, we went by their total savings was like I have to bring up the sheet. They gave you the total savings, and then it was our percentage of the savings, And it would, if you went by 1/3, it would show our percentage being only like 41 to
Right.
42,000.
So why,
But
so
to
what's
me-
the difference between the 40 and the 55?
Well, they did have, and that was one thing, I know the night that they presented, that Tuesday night, they had in their slides, they actually broke down the details of the capital items in BMS and Tohoto, but that's not actually in the slides that were given to
Mm-mm.
us. I mean, for example, I know one of the things at BMS was the sign. They had 18,000 for that. But that's excluded in the PowerPoint presentation that they did send to us. But that was included on that Tuesday night.
So they gave us a summary versus what their full presentation
Well, I
was.
thought
which
it
is
was,
to
I
be
mean, it was their full presentation, but there was somebody that started out with X number of slides, and then the finance director, I think we just got the finance director's slides.
I think you're right. I think you're right, Scott. Yeah.
I might
The
have
thought, I
up-
just didn't know if there was anything there that.
Yeah, there it is right there. Tohoto capital items. It does not show. It just shows that the total of principal and interest is almost $1.6 million, a reduction of $126,425.
So we took a third of that, or we took our
A
portion of
portion.
the assessment and just multiplied it versus this 55.
Yeah, actually, I did find that they had it for the BMS was on there showing a 35,000 placeholder for needs, the $18,000 electronic sign, and 15,000 for asphalt repairs and restriping, for a total of 68,000.
Right. So there's got to be a Tohoto capital budget.
But it may not be separated. It may just be part of their assessment. Versus the capital assessment is actually the debt.
Right. Yeah,
Oh,
they
you're
should.
saying part of their Tohoto assessment? You're saying, June, that their
Yeah.
that their special projects and other maintenance type of projects, they're just lumping into the
They could be, I
Tohoto
don't-
assessment?
Yeah, see, I don't know because Tohoto is
Okay.
Tohoto
This is
versus
where-
where Berlin Memorial would be just here in
This
town.
is where unpacking the expenses would really come in handy.
Right.
Yeah, because I mean, the reduction in the overall from the refinance is supposed to be 126,000, 126,425, and when we did a rough estimate saying 1/3 of that, that
Right.
comes out to like 41 to 42,000 on our share, not the
Yeah.
55 reduction that they show.
That-
Now,
the,
Doing a refinance would be just a part of doing business per se. That's not really their operating budget. That just has to do with, they're doing the right thing and saving the town's money. But
It
just
was-
because they save the money doesn't necessarily mean they should be able to spend it in another area. But that's just me.
The bond that they do, is that going to be the level payment each year, or does that actually decrease from year to year?
Great.
I don't know that we had that detail, Scott.
For some reason, I'm thinking it's the opposite way of we would have done it, or we've done it in the past, but I can't remember which way they did it. Because I haven't seen the new financing yet.
Stan, I don't know what
have
you think, but I don't know that we can vote on the information we have in front of us.
Well, there's
that's what I
definitely a
was
question
kind of
about some of these
thinking.
numbers.
Yeah. Sorry?
No, I said that's what I was kind of thinking when I was gonna like move to not, wait a week.
Well, we could ask or direct Margaret we could send that, I mean, if it's a letter, if it's a joint letter, if Margaret drafts it, and I don't know if we have another meeting in the interim and then we forward it to them, or I mean, if we say we can't vote on their assessment on their portion of the budget until we get some further clarification of, unpacking the numbers, we're running out of time.
Yep. And it should be worth it to them to give us what we need, because
Well, sure.
Yeah.
Margaret, what was,
they got a
what
problem.
was
if they
your
don't.
original, what was your communication with them initially? What verbiage, what did you use for wording to tell them what they were, what we were expecting out of them?
Oh, Lord. I basically gave, I had it in an email somewhere. I basically gave them our anticipated revenues and gave them the snapshot of what we're dealing with the economic uncertainty, and said because of that, we need nothing, we can't, something like, we look for a 2.5% overall, nothing more than a 2.5% overall.
See, June, that's where I would argue your point about the.
Yep,
about
you're right.
the-
Now I see what you're saying.
I mean, I absolutely understand what you're saying, but it also goes back to when we say to the fire department, okay, you need to cut 50 grand. We don't tell them. I mean, we
care
really want
where.
to cut from, we really want to cut from the inspector's salary, but since we can't tell them that, we just say we wanted to cut 50. And if they want to cut it out of, out of supplies, then that's their prerogative. So unfortunately, it's a little bit along those lines, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, we could, if we had fine tuned it and said we don't want the assessment, but that's not, I'd actually still counter that it's really our concern is the total expense to the town, not necessarily one versus the other, but.
My point, Stan, is for us to understand that 6.6%
Yeah,
increase.
absolutely.
Is it really revenue driven or is it really expense driven? And if it's expense driven, what are the things that have changed for the school? And I think we know because they highlighted them in the slides.
Yeah.
But the size of that percent increase is what I can't understand on the data we have.
Okay, so would you like, and aside from the joint letter, what if I reached out to Bob and asked him for the expense detail for their FY22 proposed Tohoto budget, backing up that 6.6% assessment increase, or backing up their overall budget increase?
Yeah, I mean, we could even say that they, what would be helpful is if they instead of a slide that says these are the main budget drivers or these were the things that cost us X dollars, it might be helpful for them to start off with the premise of, with things under our control or that we had as an actual budget that we feel we would have submitted extraneous of these things, it was 2.6%. And then we had to add this, and this, and that's what actually makes it 6.6. Instead of trying to back into it, it feels like they should be setting that forward and say, we know that you wanted it to be this. Here's the number that it should have been, but it's not because of these very specific things. And I think they tried to get it at it that way, but I don't think it quite comes out that way. And I also don't think, because we had to keep going back and saying, well, what did this divide out to make as a percentage, or what did this work out to? And I think that if it was presented a little bit differently, I think it might be clearer, unlike me right now.
I agree, Stan. I think it could have been presented a little more a helpful way on both ends. Helpful to them if we understand what they're trying to say and we don't.
Well, right, because I mean, they never said that the 170,000 or whatever that numbers was that they had as the primary driver, that the number one thing, which is which is what I would say is their stuff under their control. They didn't say, okay, so this is our budget. I mean, this is increased by this amount, and that's 2.6%. But now this, and this make it up to 6%. It all just got lumped together at the very end and came up with the 2.6, and they thought, okay, that's fine. But it would be better to say that each one of those things represented what percentage, or, I mean, I know there was a whole dollar amount, but it might actually be better to say what the percentage of the increase it was. I don't know, maybe that muddies the works, but.
We're just having some detail on the expense side would let us calculate percentages too, so.
Right. But there is, I also still have that question about what's the difference, why the capital assessment, the Tohono capital assessment number is different than 1/3 of their bond savings. And there should be a more of a detail as to what that Tohono capital assessment includes, and whether it's, you know, not only is it just that, and so why is the number different? And if it is just that, then why we should be seeing what their other capital things are that are lumped in under the assessment.
Do we have the FY20 numbers real quick available? Because that would at least tell us whether or
Yeah.
not the
Yeah.
capital assessment has been level or been decreasing slightly over
All right.
the years.
It's probably going to open up a lot of columns, so I'll try to. Yes, it will. Recommended FY20. Okay, maybe. Oh gosh, hold on. Let me scroll over a little bit here. Let's see. Oh, there we go. It's okay. Let me hide these first, and then I'll hide these next few, and we'll be good.
So it
Oh,
did go
there.
down from 612 to 576.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a pretty big drop with 36,000.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh, and there's so many more. Yeah. Oh, I've got to.
I'm sorry, what are you keen
I
on,
was
Scott?
just looking at whether the capital assessment, the bond and the principal and interest, whether that had been a flat number over the first 10 years of that bond, or if that has been decreasing each
There,
year.
oops,
And it looks like
sorry.
it does decrease, like you saw
Right.
the decrease of nearly 36,000 or over 36,000 from 20 to 21. So there probably was some other decrease that would have normally have happened even without the refinance, and then the refinance
Oh,
brings it
right,
down
yes,
another
Alphabet
41.
has the same thing. It's a accelerating
Mm,
payoff.
Well, it is interesting that the previous was 36,000, and this one, with it, assuming we're 1/3 of that, 41,000 is with a refinance, but that would only leave a drop of 14,000. So I don't know if it steadily goes down or if it's
mhm.
It's supposed to. I thought it was pretty linear.
Are you two saying that the debt service is in the capital assessment, not in the operating budget?
Yes,
Okay,
well,
thank
I
you.
am.
Okay, that was
Well, I hope it is, because we have been using that number, their capital assessment, as the excluded debt amount. So they report that to us, and we
Thank you.
include that in our debt exclusion.
Thank you. Okay.
so maybe it's also the interesting question is, why is it only even there
Yeah.
at 55,000 if they're
Yep.
looking at savings of 41,000?
Right.
Again, maybe we have to go back and we could look at FY 19, 18, 17 and see what the trend has been.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty linear. I don't think it's decelerating. I could be wrong.
Actually show it going back to 15, it was 534. 16, it was 536. 17, it was 534. 18, it was 549. 19, it was 614. 20, it was 612. But I know that they hadn't done permanent borrowing until, I think.
Oh, sure, that would affect it too. Okay, so yeah, when the permanent financing went into effect, that
Wait.
that could account for a bigger drop in that first year.
It just doesn't seem right. It doesn't seem right.
It doesn't.
With refinancing, there should be a much bigger drop.
Right. I'm just wondering if they
No,
did
but I think-
refinance, what would the number be?
That's
Yeah.
what this 55 is. The refinancing, I think, is this.
Yeah, but
this
then how do
year's.
we explain the reduction from FY20 to FY21?
Right. Why did it go from 612 to 576?
Could that be COVID related?
No.
Like they
Could
pulled
be
something?
No, I don't think so.
They
But
pulled
it
some
could be.
working off?
Could
No.
part of
But could
There
it
was, I know that there was one year that when they did some sort of I want to say did the permanent or whatever, there was an issue, and I can remember talking to Bob about it, and that we had overpaid and that he was going to credit us the following year.
Mhm.
So that's
So I don't know if it
okay.
was that was the year, maybe, I don't
So
know.
21 would be an abnormally large decrease.
Mhm.
That would
That
be a
would make
question to
sense.
ask them, I would say, to clarify.
Yep. Because the
I
other
guess-
thing is that the refi or the turning into permanent financing could there also be additional costs that artificially raised it to the 612? Kind of putting it outside the normal curve of payback?
It's a good question because that was only the second year of
Right.
that would have, yeah, that's a good question. But it's a question we can't answer at the moment
No.
either.
No. I'm not sure we'll get a hard, concrete answer back out of them, but at least they know we'll be questioning. At least we're questioning it.
I can put together an email with the request for the expense detail. What some more backup to understand what the percent of increase each of the key drivers represents, and adding detail on the capital assessment.
And certainly stating that it's also from FinCom.
And it's from FinCom.
Yeah, one other thing, I mean, I guess we could look back ourselves is the state aid. Has that been a steady increase over the last few years? Because I mean, that's one of the big issues here is by the the level. Some assuming the level of funding of state aid, the entire increase is going into the assessment. And if there would have been I'm not sure what the numbers would be. I mean, we have it there as like, if you assumed a 3% increase or a 4% increase or whatever from state aid, how much does that take it down? And what's been the typical state aid over the last 4 or 5 years?
So when I ran those numbers, I was talking about before, the DLS numbers. I was talking about a $26,000 number. Well, that was so if the Tohoto reduction in Chapter 70 shows us 47,000. You reduce that by 26,000. I asked Bob. I asked him why the reduction shouldn't be more like a $19,000 reduction or something like that. And he explained, Desi, I need to understand that better too myself. And I'm hard pressed to think that there isn't going to be some increase with the federal legislation that just came out. So I feel like there's probably going to be a little more state aid than they're anticipating. That's what
And don't forget, we're being conservative on our revenue numbers too. So.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Because the state aid is targeted at 1.2 million. I don't know what the trend has been over the last few years.
Yeah, but it'd be real easy to throw up your hands and say, "Oh, COVID, how are we going to know?"
Yeah, and like Bob said, and I do believe this, that they are putting a little more toward the disadvantaged school districts.
Yes. I guess what I'm saying is that it would be hard, Scott, to use historical numbers to apply to 2021.
Yeah.
No, what I was just going to say is when people look at percentages from previous years, to know that some of those percentages were absorbed by increases in state aid. And all of a
Right, but
sudden
I'm
when
just
you
saying that the
level
state
it,
aid is just so unknown. That's just such a
well,
variable.
it's always unknown.
Could you ask them to, I mean, I know you can't put it in the line item, but we certainly could ask them to tell us what their state aid was in the previous year, so we could at least get an estimate or a guesstimate, or at least look and see, what it is, and kind of come up with an average. I have no idea what their I don't even understand their budget in all of in this. It's just beyond me. I'm sorry.
Well, the prior year state aid should be it should be readily available. So we should be able to get that very easily. Because once the legislature approves the local aid and the aid to school districts, it's out there. They have long
Right. So at least
historical
we might
trends.
be able to look at that. And
Mhm.
if we see that, it went from, $10,000 less this year than last year, or 2 years, we might have to have 5 years of data before we can, looking back 5 years, what I need to be able to try to come up with something. I don't know. It's,
Well, my understanding is that the state aid money goes in and out of the account, and whatever's left over or is needed is, I don't want to call it a slush fund, but what do they call that, June? What's
E and
their?
D, excess and deficiency.
Free
Yeah,
cash.
Free cash.
Free cash. So, I mean, they are giving us a budget that's based on what they perceive as their either ability to have surplus or ability to expend out of it based on everything else that they're looking at. So whether they got increased in state funds from year to year or decreased in state funds from year to year, I'm not really sure that it's relevant to our discussion. I think it's I'm not sure it matters. I mean, that's their decision to decide what to put for their revenue number based on, because they're using that E&D. There's a number in there for E&D that they're plugging in
no,
from
I hear what
prior.
you're saying. Yeah.
So if it's gone up or if it's gone down, it's their comfort level, just like it's our comfort level to use free cash to whatever extent we want to use it. So again, we could go back and say adjust your revenue number so that it adjusts down our assessment, but I'm
I'm
not
up
sure.
for a
Actually, do we even
revenue
have the right to do that, Margaret?
Oh, we don't. We only have the right to vote up or down their bottom line. That's it, really.
Yeah, I mean, we can't go back and say put a different revenue number so that our assessment's lower, because we think
No, I know, I
you're being too conservative.
So that I could understand it better more than.
Yeah,
That would help. Yeah.
But Stan, without asking the school district to change its budget, it's still, for me, be very helpful in understanding how to vote on this, right?
right.
And so, and also to be able to explain it to people in town.
Agreed. I just want to play devil's advocate and say that we're trying to play everything very conservative, very conservative, very conservative. And when the school does the same thing, we're crying foul because you're not showing us enough revenue and it's increasing our assessment. So I think we should just keep that in mind. That's all.
No, but I'm with Mary. I was just thinking of it out loud in my head so I could better understand.
Well, yeah, I mean, their numbers are not the least bit clear. I mean, they need to be much more broken out, and yes, absolutely.
So Stan, I'll draft an email tomorrow and get it to you. You can look at it and
I'd
see if
appreciate
I've missed
that.
anything. Sure. Okay.
I mean, and then so say you submitted it, you gave it to me to review, and this is from you and FinCom, and absolutely.
Okay. All right. Got it. Do you want to tackle any of these other lines here in this section, or do you want to wait on the whole section? And do you want to tackle lines 110 through 117?
Well, there's not much we can do about 110 through 117.
We might as well vote on that.
Those are pretty, we don't really have any control over the retirement and insurance for that matter. You know what I mean? So I make a motion I make a motion to accept section 900 miscellaneous benefit insurance 110 to 117.
Crickets.
I'm out there by myself here.
Second.
Where's Scott?
I'm standing for the cherry sheets here, so sorry. The second.
Gosh, I thought I was in it alone here, Stan.
Yeah, I was with you, Janet. Don't worry.
It's getting late.
Yeah, I know, getting slap happy.
Margaret, do we need to adjust the Medicare amount at all? It says it's on hold.
No, Dennis has confirmed does not need to be adjusted. That is good to
Not
go.
even at 2%?
No, because it came in under the budgeted amount last year, and even with the 2%, it does not add that much more. So Dennis has sent me an email on that, so we're good.
Which one was that, June? I'm sorry.
Medicare,
116.
just because if it's a percentage of payroll.
Yeah.
All right, so any further discussion on items we can't control?
How come our liability went down? That's like and I'm not complaining about it. I'm just saying it's
Which one?
our
Oh.
liability.
We're no longer covering the
Chapter.
school. That's the school
Oh,
is
yeah,
covering
yeah.
that.
Okay, yep. I mean, it's not a lot, but
But don't worry, the Worcester retirement went up, so.
yeah, a lot.
Mm-hmm. Don't you worry, they get their money.
Mhm.
All right. Hearing no further discussion, roll call, Stan, aye.
Very high.
Janet, I.
Oh,
Did we lose Julie?
Talking and
Here she is.
Julie, I.
Scott, I.
well,
All
you
right.
made great
So are we
progress.
going to, we're just gonna leave whatever that is, 105 to 109?
I mean, for now, we haven't discussed
Or
ASIP
it's
at all,
actually-
but I mean, we
Well,
always.
can we do Assabet and get that one off the table? I mean, what is CMRPC? What?
That's Central Mass Regional Planning Commission. They're
Okay.
the ones that help the town
Yeah,
do all
yeah.
kinds of. Yeah.
So I think we could probably do, just for the sake of notes and getting it off the table, we could probably do 102, 103, 104, and 105, right? And could we even do 6 and 7? It's really just Tohoto we have an issue with, right? Or an understanding, should I say?
I think we ought to leave the whole district, just leave it out of the vote tonight.
So do 102, 103, 104, and 105?
That's what I'd do, yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
I make a motion that we accept 102, 103, 104, and 105, which is the CMRPC in Assabet.
Just,
Oh, in a housing consortium.
yes, okay, so
Sorry,
Yeah,
that's,
what is that
sorry,
again?
sorry. Two different things, the Assabet Regional Housing Consortium plus the Assabet School System Assessment and Capital Assessment.
to
Did I
answer
get 'em all?
Stan's-
Yes,
Okay,
go ahead, Margaret.
So to answer your question, Stan, the Assabet Regional Housing Consortium is a consortium that's comprised of a whole bunch of area towns served by Metro West Housing Collaborative. The town is going to be contracting with them to monitor all of our housing, affordable housing stock. So they're going to be able to assure that our affordable housing stays on the subsidized housing inventory, and which is going to help the town be able to control the amount of growth in the housing stock, particularly affordable housing in the future. So the town is going to begin to contract with them on July 1st. So
And
did that come into effect basically because you buy a house at X amount of money and it's affordable, and then you sell it at a greater increase and it's no longer affordable? Isn't that why that entire consortium was generated years ago?
It was,
Okay.
and
It just
you're
made sure I
absolutely
understood.
right. Yep, you're absolutely right, because if a house goes on the market or sells for market value, it's taken off the subsidized housing inventory, and the town has not been able to monitor those, and we've lost a few units because of it. So
Well,
this
we've
should
lost
help.
a lot of units because of it, and some people made some very good profit on flipping affordable housing and selling it at not affordable, whatever you call it, market.
that was in as a deed restriction, no?
Not
Some
back
of
when they
40
first
Bs.
started, yeah.
Yeah, some of it depends on the program, believe it or not, depends on the program they are added to the subsidized housing inventory under. So a lot of them are deed restricted, but we do have some units that aren't deed restricted in perpetuity. And those are the ones that really, really need to be watched.
I'm thinking of, and maybe June is probably the only one that maybe even remembers it, but I'm thinking about all the affordable housing that went in across the street from the Jones Road transfer station. A
That's
lot of those, yeah.
Just so the finance committee is aware, the funding for this line would be coming from the town's affordable housing account. And for this year, in future years, the intent is to fund this line outside of the operating budget from CPA affordable housing
Oh.
funds.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Margaret, I just have a question. Does the formula matter there underneath the change?
Underneath
There's
what
no
sheet?
formula as far as an increase of $12,000.
Right. Well, it'd be like
Oh, no, I
right?
didn't even plug it
I
in.
just didn't know if that affected the rest of this, formulas anywhere else.
Oh, it probably will. I'll put it in here.
But isn't it, what is it infinite? If it goes from 0 to 12, is there?
Yeah,
Here
we don't want the
go.
percentage change there.
Okay. All right, there you go. Oh, I don't know. Let me see. Is it going to add all of it?
12,000%.
Oh my God, what have I done? That's
Oh,
what
what have
happens
I
when
done?
that just subtracts this amount from this amount, and that's all added up.
Maybe you should do this tomorrow morning, Margaret.
Oh, yeah, I think
Sorry.
you might be right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All
I'll
right.
double check it. I'll double check the formulas in the morning.
But so Margaret, that sounds like a reasonable number to you, by the way. I mean, is that
12,000? It
Yeah.
does. It does. And future years might be a little less than that. They have a lot of front end work to do as far as deed
Yeah,
research and putting together files.
yeah, that would be my guess. Okay.
Yep.
Seemed like a big number to me, but and how many towns is this consortium?
I want to say we're probably at, I want to say 6 or 7 towns now, including towns, Hudson, Harvard, Boxborough, Littleton, bunch of surrounding
And
towns.
how are they doing the assessment?
They have a $75 an hour consulting cost, and they have 3 different buckets. I can provide you a copy of the agreement so you can see, or the
I'd
sheet.
just be curious how it's divided. Like, is it by town population? I mean, or by housing stock
Every town,
units? Or?
no. Every town pays an equal share towards some base services. It's not broken out by town. Every town pays what it expects to get in hours from Metro West. So it varies town to town. So, yeah.
Okay.
I can share the spreadsheet with FinCom so you can take a look and see who's paying what.
Yeah, I mean, I would expect that if we don't have as large a housing stock as some of the other towns, it shouldn't be as much to monitor.
They're pretty, it's, I'll tell you who they are. It's Bolton, Boxborough, Devens, Harvard, Hudson, Lancaster, Little, and Stowe.
Yep.
Okay.
And
Littleton?
Littleton. Hudson's the lead town. And believe it or not, Berlin has a really decent housing stock, comparatively speaking, with the other communities. I'll share that with you too, so you can take a look and see what they've got.
Sounds good.
Okay.
All right, so we're putting off the school.
Wait a minute. We have a motion on the table.
Oh,
and
that's
I don't
right.
think we finished it.
So we had a
Right.
discussion.
And I don't think we have a second, do we?
Second.
Any further discussion? So we're voting on 102 through 105.
5. Yep.
Okay, roll call vote. Stan, aye. Oh,
Mary?
actually, can I refrain for 1 second?
Yeah.
So the Assabet assessment went up a little bit more than the 2.5%, but that was student driven, right? We had, was it 3 more students there, or one student?
Yep, you're correct. We had more.
We tend to gloss over Assabet and just say that, it is what it is, but I just wanted to make sure we were all on the same page on that. Okay, roll call vote. Stan, aye.
Mary, aye.
Janet, I.
Julie, aye.
Scott, aye.
All
Motion
right.
carries unanimously. So we just have 4 little line items to discuss next week.
You made great progress
I was
tonight.
gonna say, you guys did awesome tonight.
Wow.
Julie has a
Wow.
question.
Yes, Julie.
I just want, with the questions to the school district, is that going to be enough time for us to discuss next week when we get the feedback, or do we have to have a meeting
Well,
before
we're going to
that?
give them a deadline, right, Margaret?
Yeah, I will, I'll get this
Plus,
out
it might not be
tomorrow
like-
and, yeah, and Bob's usually pretty quick. It depends on the information, but, I think that you'll have it in time before your meeting next week.
I mean,
We'll
it's
give 'em a
not like they
deadline.
have to, right? It's not like he has to recreate the wheel, but I mean, the numbers should all be there. It's just
Yeah,
a matter of,
okay.
but
And that's all we have to do next week, or is there another?
I think,
At that point, we're going to be taking this
well, we have to
working
do the
budget.
articles.
Yeah, you have to start reviewing
articles, yeah.
articles.
Okay,
The board has talked about holding town meeting in June, but I've asked the board to please consider bumping it up to even a few weeks later in May, mid-May to late May. Because otherwise it puts us against the end of fiscal year wall, in order to prepare for the coming year's budget. So we may have a little bit of
But
breathing
for our
room.
committee, Julie, we need to look at, because we have to have votes on all the on any articles and where the funding is going to come from.
And I'll put together your the working budget spreadsheet into that concise finance committee recommended, report format for you.
Thank you. Anything else tonight, guys?
I'm done.
All right.
Make a
me too.
motion to adjourn since I did all the others.
thank you.
Thank you, guys.